The email notification arrived at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon in September. My hands trembled as I read the subject line, "Congratulations, Dr. Sarah Chen." I had to read it 3 times before the words actually penetrated the fog of anxiety that had surrounded me for weeks. I had passed my doctoral defense. After 7 years of sleepless nights, rejected grant proposals, failed experiments, and moments when I genuinely questioned my ability to think, I had finally earned my PhD in neuroscience. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. The first person I wanted to call was my mother. She had always been my champion, the one who told me I could do impossible things when I was too exhausted to believe it myself. I was trembling with a kind of euphoria I hadn't felt since childhood, that pure, uncomplicated joy of accomplishment. My parents had promised they would be there for my defense. Not just there, they had promised it would be their priority. My father had already taken the day off work. My mother had arranged her schedule weeks in advance. My younger brother Matthew had even texted me that morning with a simple message. "Gonna be there to see you crush it." I dialed my mother's number, barely able to contain my excitement. She answered on the second ring. "Mom, I did it. I passed." There was a pause. Not the pause of someone who was processing good news, but the pause of someone who had forgotten something important. That's when I heard it in the background. A crowd noise, cheering, the unmistakable sound of a stadium. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful." Her voice was bright, but it had that artificial quality it took on when she was stressed. "I'm so proud of you." "Mom, where are you?" Another pause, longer this time. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I know this is terrible timing, but there was a complication with the regional playoffs. Matthew's team made it to the championship game, and they needed—" I don't remember what else she said. The words blurred together, but I understood the gist perfectly. They had chosen my brother's baseball game, a regional playoff game that, by my mother's own logic, would be followed by sectionals, then states, then potentially nationals, over my doctoral defense. The one event I had been preparing for my entire adult life. The culmination of a 7-year journey that had nearly broken me more than once. "Did you not come to my defense?" I asked quietly. "Honey, I'm so sorry. Your father is going to be there. He's on his way to the university right now. And you're so smart. You didn't need all of us." I hung up. I sat in my office for the next 2 hours, staring at the diploma certificate they had printed for me, the one I had been too emotional to pick up before leaving campus. My doctoral advisor texted me asking if I wanted to grab coffee to celebrate. I didn't respond. My best friend called to see how I was feeling. I let it go to voicemail. My father texted me a photo from the audience of my defense. Just him, sitting alone among the empty chairs that my family was supposed to fill, with a message. "I'm sorry about your mother. You were extraordinary in there. I've never been more proud." That should have meant something. It probably did in some small way. But what I felt was a crushing, all-consuming sense of erasure. My biggest achievement had been reduced to a secondary concern, something that could be rescheduled or downgraded depending on the sports calendar. Over the following days, my family's attempts at damage control were almost worse than the initial betrayal. My mother called repeatedly with increasingly elaborate justifications. Matthew's team was dependent on him. He was the pitcher, and they couldn't win without him. The regional playoffs only came once a year. This could be his ticket to a Division I college program. Didn't I understand how important this was? What I understood was that nothing I did would ever be as important to them as what my brother did. I was the eldest, the one who had always been responsible, who had always handled things on my own. Matthew was the golden child, the athlete, the one who made them feel young and connected to the world of possibility. I was the invisible one who achieved things in silence, in laboratories, in academic journals that none of them read or could understand. My father tried to bridge the gap with a more direct approach. He came to my apartment on a Saturday morning with flowers and an apology that, while genuine, couldn't undo the fundamental fracture that had opened up between me and my family. I appreciated the effort, but it felt like putting a bandage on a severed limb. "I was there," he said quietly, sitting on my couch. "I saw what you did. I understood how brilliant it was, even if I don't understand the science. I'm proud of you, Sarah. I need you to know that." "But you're not them," I said, "and they made a choice. They chose him." My father had no response to that because we both knew it was true. For 3 weeks, I didn't respond to any calls from my mother or brother. I answered my father's texts with short, civil responses that indicated I acknowledged his existence, but wasn't ready to let down my guard. During that time, I did something I'm not proud of. I started planning. It began with small ideas: missing their calls when they tried to check in, being conveniently busy when they suggested family dinners, creating a distance that would make them understand what it felt like to be overlooked. But the hurt ran too deep for small gestures. I wanted them to feel what I felt. I wanted them to experience the sting of being considered unimportant. I wanted to show them that their betrayal had consequences. The opportunity came in the form of my brother's championship game. His team had indeed made it all the way, and now they were playing for the state title. My mother had called and texted repeatedly over the previous week, trying to get me to come to the game. Apparently, it was being held at a venue not far from my apartment, and she thought it would be wonderful if we could all be there together, a family united. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. That's when I made a decision that would ultimately reshape everything. I told my mother I would be there. I told her I was looking forward to celebrating Matthew's achievement. I painted a picture of reconciliation and family unity. She was so relieved that she almost cried on the phone. Matthew texted me a simple emoji, a baseball, and a heart. My father sent me a message thanking me for being the bigger person, but I wasn't being the bigger person. I was orchestrating something far more calculated. On the day of the state championship game, I dressed carefully in clothes I knew would be unflattering, nothing like the polished, accomplished version of myself they would expect. I arrived at the stadium early and did something I had learned to do in graduate school. I made myself completely invisible by being completely ordinary. I sat in the stands, 3 rows behind my family with a perfect view of their faces. I watched my mother's excitement, my brother's nervous energy before the game, my father's quiet pride. And I waited. During the 7th inning, with Matthew on the pitcher's mound and my family at the edge of their seats, I made a series of phone calls. The first was to the university where I had just started working as a postdoctoral researcher. I told them I would be accepting the position at Stanford instead, their rival institution. The second was to a journalist I knew from graduate school who specialized in science and innovation stories. I told her I had something potentially interesting to discuss about my research and my recent completion of my PhD program. The third call was to a lawyer, when Matthew's team won the championship game in the 10th inning, and they did win. Matthew pitched beautifully. My family erupted in celebration. My mother jumped to her feet, screaming with joy. My father pumped his fist in the air. Matthew, covered in sweat and glory, looked up at the stands as if searching for me in the crowd. I applauded calmly from my seat 3 rows back, an anonymous figure in a crowd of thousands. Later that evening, when they drove to my apartment to celebrate with me, I was waiting with the news about Stanford. I delivered it calmly, like someone announcing they had decided to order pizza for dinner. My mother's face cycled through confusion, disappointment, and then a kind of frantic negotiation. "But you told us you were taking the position at the university," she said. "We were going to see you all the time. We could do family dinners again." "Plans change," I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Stanford offered me a better position. I'll be leading my own lab there. I've accepted." "But Sarah, that's across the country," my father said. "When were you planning to tell us?" "I'm telling you now." What followed was 3 days of escalating chaos. My mother tried everything: tears, guilt, logical arguments about why I should stay. She called me at work. She showed up at my apartment. She sent emails about how this was all a reaction to their missing my defense, and that if I would just forgive them, everything could go back to normal. That's when I realized something crucial. I didn't want things to go back to normal. Normal was me being invisible. Normal was my achievements being secondary to my brother's athletic pursuits. Normal was my mother showing up to every single one of Matthew's games, while somehow always having a convenient conflict when something related to my career was happening. The journalist ran a story about my research. It was a beautiful piece, highlighting not just the science, but the personal journey, the sacrifices, the years of work, the moment of triumph when I defended my dissertation. The piece went viral in academic circles. My mother read it and called me, crying. "I didn't know," she said. "I didn't understand how hard this was for you." "You could have asked," I said. "You could have been there." "We can fix this," she insisted. "We can still celebrate you. Let us throw you a party. Let us make it right." But I had moved beyond the point where a party could fix anything. I had passed through anger into something harder and colder, a clarity about what I needed to do to protect myself from this kind of hurt again. I started the process of creating distance. I changed my phone number and gave it only to my father. I created new email accounts for work-related communications. I made it clear to my family that I would no longer be participating in family holidays, that my schedule was simply too demanding with my move to Stanford and the setup of my new lab. The reaction was severe. My mother's calls became frantic. My brother texted me repeatedly, apologizing for something he had done and something he hadn't done, confused about why he was being punished for a decision their parents had made. My father tried to mediate, to help me understand that my mother had been under stress, that Matthew was just a kid who didn't understand the weight of the decisions being made around him. "They chose him over me," I said to my father when he tried to intercede. "And now I'm choosing myself over them." "That's not how family works," he said quietly. "Maybe it should be," I replied. The month before my move to Stanford, the journalist called me again. She wanted to do a follow-up story, interviewing my family about what it was like to have a family member achieve something so significant. I told her no initially, but then I reconsidered. If they wanted to understand what this meant to me, maybe they should see it reflected back at them through someone else's lens. I called my mother and told her that a journalist wanted to interview the family. I downplayed it, made it sound like a small piece for an academic journal. She was enthusiastic, seeing it as an opportunity for reconciliation, for showing me that we were a proud, close family. What the journalist actually wrote was a nuanced, sympathetic portrait of a family fractured by misplaced priorities. She interviewed my parents separately, and their two versions of why they missed my defense revealed the cracks in their marriage that I had never known existed. My mother admitted that she and my father had been growing distant, and that she had started using Matthew's achievements as a way to feel connected to something vibrant and present in her life. My father confessed that he had been profoundly disappointed by their choice, but that he had been too conflict-averse to push back against my mother's decision. Matthew, when interviewed, seemed genuinely shocked to discover that my family had missed my defense at all, and guilty in a way that seemed more real and more painful than anything I had anticipated. The article was titled "The Cost of Invisibility: When Family Success Becomes Family Burden. It was published in a major online magazine and spread quickly through social media. My extended family read it. My parents' friends read it. My brother's coaches and teammates read it. And then my mother stopped calling. For 2 weeks, there was silence. Complete, absolute silence. No texts, no emails, no attempts at contact. I told myself I had won. I had made my point. I had forced them to see what they had done and the impact it had had on me. Instead, what I felt was empty. It was my father who finally reached out. He came to my apartment the week before I was scheduled to move to California. He looked exhausted in a way I had never seen before, his face lined with something that looked like grief. "Your mother is in therapy," he said without preamble. "She's dealing with some things she's been avoiding for a long time. She wanted me to tell you that she's sorry. Not sorry that you're upset, but sorry for the choice she made. She says she knows you probably don't want to hear from her, but she wanted you to know." I didn't say anything. "Matthew is also struggling," my father continued. "He's been having a hard time at school. He asked if there was something he did to make you hate him." I told him the truth, that you don't hate him, that you're hurt, and that sometimes hurt people they love. I don't think he really understood what I meant. "He was the pitcher in the championship game," I said, hating how childish I sounded. "He got what he wanted. He also got to read in a national magazine that his older sister was so unimportant to his family that she was missing from a moment that should have been celebrated." My father said quietly, "He feels like he took something from you. He feels guilty about something he didn't actually do because he's 16 years old and his sister just cut off his entire family." Something cracked in my chest when he said that. Not a small crack, but a significant one. The kind that lets everything you've been holding together start to leak out. "I wanted them to understand," I said, my voice breaking. "I wanted them to feel how it felt." "And now?" my father asked. "How does it feel?" I didn't have an answer for him because the truth was that it felt worse, not better. It never felt better. My move to Stanford happened as planned. I threw myself into my research with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I assembled a brilliant team, published groundbreaking papers, and built a reputation as one of the leading young neuroscientists in the country. By every measure, I was successful beyond my wildest dreams, and I was also profoundly alone. For the first year, I maintained the cutting off. I didn't respond to letters from my mother. I didn't acknowledge the birthday gift my brother sent me. I accepted my father's monthly calls but kept them brief and impersonal. I had made my point, and I was going to maintain my position, no matter the cost. It was a colleague at Stanford who finally broke through my armor. Dr. James Rodriguez was a clinical psychologist who had started dating one of my postdocs, which meant he occasionally attended lab social events. After the third or fourth encounter, he found me alone in the break room one evening and asked me directly, "Are you okay? You seem profoundly sad." Something about the directness of the question, from someone who had no stake in my family drama and nothing to gain from my answer, made me tell him the truth. I told him about my defense, my family's choice, and the slow-motion revenge I had orchestrated in response. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he asked, "Did it work? Are you happy?" "I made my point," I said. "That's not what I asked." The honesty in that question and my inability to answer it forced me to confront something I had been avoiding for 12 months. I wasn't happy. I had thought that creating distance would protect me from the pain of being overlooked, but instead, it had just multiplied the pain. I had turned one family betrayal into several, and then I had added the betrayal of cutting my father out of my life, a man who had shown up, who had been proud, who had always tried to be fair. I started therapy. Not because I wanted to reconcile with my family, that part took much longer, but because I needed to understand why I had thought revenge would feel good when it had only felt empty. My therapist asked me an important question. Did your family hurt you because they didn't love you, or did they hurt you in spite of loving you? That distinction, once pointed out, was impossible to ignore. They had made a terrible choice. They had hurt me deeply, but they had never stopped loving me. And in my crusade to make them understand my hurt, I had decided that the most painful thing I could do would be to stop loving them back. It took me another 6 months before I could call my mother. When I finally did, she answered on the first ring, even though it was early in the morning, and she immediately started crying. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I was wrong. I made a terrible choice, and I've regretted it every single day." "I'm sorry too," I said, "for cutting you off, for using that journalist to hurt you, for all of it." We talked for hours that day. She told me about her therapy, about things she was working through that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with how she had been raised to always prioritize other people's needs. She told me about watching my brother struggle with guilt and confusion about why his big sister had disappeared from his life. She told me about my father trying to hold everyone together while simultaneously grieving the family unity that had been shattered. When I hung up, I was raw and exhausted and relieved in a way that sleep hadn't given me in over a year. The reconciliation didn't happen all at once. I didn't fly home for the holidays or suddenly pretend that nothing had changed. But I did start to heal, and I did start to let them back into my life, carefully, honestly, and with boundaries. My mother never missed another significant achievement of mine. When I got awarded my first major research grant, she was there, along with my father and Matthew. When I published my first major paper as a lab director, they celebrated with me via video call. And when I got named as one of 30 scientists under 40 by the National Academy of Sciences, the whole family attended the ceremony. Matthew and I had the harder conversation. He called me one evening and apologized for something that had never been his responsibility. "It wasn't your fault," I told him. "You were just playing baseball." "But you were angry at me," he said. "I felt it. I didn't understand why, but I felt it." "I was angry at my parents," I said, "and I took it out on you in a way that wasn't fair. I'm sorry for that." "I get it now," he said. "I read all the articles. I understand how important that was." "It was," I said. "And so is your baseball. That's not a bad thing. I was just hurt that it seemed to matter more than the things I was doing." "It didn't," he said. "That was never the case. Mom made a choice and it was a bad one, but it wasn't because she didn't care about you." Hearing forgiveness in my brother's voice, especially when he had been wronged by my actions just as much as I had been wronged by theirs, was somehow more healing than anything else could have been. The aftermath of this whole ordeal has been complex. I'm still occasionally surprised by moments of resentment that bubble up, small reminders of the pain and the time that was lost. There are still family dynamics that aren't what I wish they were. My parents' marriage, shaken by the stress and revelations of this period, is rebuilding but fragile. My relationship with my family is warmer but more cautious than it was before. But here's what I learned that I didn't understand when I was orchestrating my revenge. Healing is not about making the people who hurt you hurt as much as you hurt. It's about deciding that your pain matters enough to deserve a future that isn't consumed by it. I could have stayed in that place of calculated distance, carefully orchestrating consequences and maintaining my wall of hurt. And in the short term, it felt powerful. But power that comes from causing pain is a brittle thing, and it doesn't actually make you feel less broken. The truth is that my family wasn't unusual. They were three imperfect people making choices based on incomplete information and their own struggles. My mother was dealing with depression and disconnection that she didn't have the tools to address. My father was conflict averse to a fault. My brother was just a kid who wanted his family to be proud of him, and I was someone who had let the absence of acknowledgement from one source make me believe I was invisible entirely, when there were people in my life who saw me, who celebrated me, who believed in me. The real achievement of my life hasn't been the PhD or the research grants or the national recognition. It's been learning that I could choose to stop letting other people's failures to show up properly become the defining narrative of my story. 3 years after my doctoral defense, my family threw me a belated celebration. Not because I needed their validation, I had moved past that, but because they wanted to mark the beginning of my healing, not just the beginning of my career. It was a simple dinner, nothing fancy, but what mattered was that we were all there, all present, all trying. My mother pulled me aside that evening and said something I'll never forget. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. But I'm also grateful that you loved yourself enough to walk away until we could learn to love you the way you deserve. I had thought cutting them off was about making them understand my worth. But what I actually had done, in finally refusing to accept their poor treatment, was defend my own worth. And that, it turned out, was the most important thing all along. The revenge I had sought, the careful orchestration of consequences and the calculated hurt, it had never been what I really needed. What I needed was to understand that I deserved better, and then to have the courage to demand it. Once I did that, healing became possible. I'm not going to tell you that everything is perfect now. We're still a family with work to do. But we're a family that's trying, and we're a family that's choosing each other, which is infinitely better than whatever victory I thought I was winning by cutting them off. The greatest revenge I could have taken wasn't the one I planned. It was becoming so undeniably successful and fulfilled that no one could ever wonder if I was overlooked or undervalued. And then, from that place of genuine confidence and achievement, I chose to let my family back in, not because I needed them to validate me, but because I wanted them to be part of my life. That's a more powerful ending than any carefully orchestrated comeuppance could ever be.